Hello, I'm Oral Gibbs, and welcome to Oral Gibbs Live. I have a very interesting guest on the program this evening with me. He's been here before. You're going to find out more about tonight's program. Our sponsors, the Windward Island Bank, Windward Islands Bank in Phillipsburg, also in Cul-de-sac and in Simpson Bay. The Windward Island Bank for all your banking needs. It is the Windward Islands Bank. And we also have GEBE, our local water and electricity company. GEBE, serving St. Martin for over 6 decades. 24 hours a day, it's GEBE. And I'm here on Oral Gibbs Live with a very interesting gentleman. He's Secretary of Pro-Swaliga Movement. How are you doing, Mr. Brison?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me back. It's good to be here.
Very good having the program. How have things been going so far?
Things are going good. We were quiet basically for the last, let's say, 6 months or
That's
so.
an understatement, quiet.
Well, yeah. Well, when we say quiet, we weren't running to the courthouses and having court cases and those things, which we're kind of known for.
Right.
So we were kind of using different channels in the last 6-7 months, and with the changeover with the Dutch government in January, we believe, it opened up doors to make new relationships and have new conversations with new people. So that's what's been going on, really.
So how you all feel about the new government? You think this is a government that St. Martin can work with?
You know something? Here's the thing, Oral. We don't want to, there's a saying that says basically, I think Maya Angelou said this. She said, when a person shows you who they are, believe them the first time. So we were in the middle of a pandemic. CNOPS gets the brunt of the blame, but CNOPS wasn't doing anything without the blessings of the Dutch state. And the Dutch state made it quite clear what they wanted to do in the middle of a pandemic. So we're not, just because there's a new state secretary, maybe a new minister of foreign affairs, we are not out of the clear yet. So we're not going to say things are better until obviously this coho legislation is put away permanently. Yes.
Well, before we continue, I had you in the program about a little over 2 years ago, right?
I would say last year sometime. Late last year.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. I thought it was
early last year.
Oh,
early
okay.
last year.
And that was your first time on the program,
Correct.
right?
Yes, sir.
So for people who don't know who
Yeah.
you are as Secretary of
Yes.
Pro-Swaliga Movement, explain it, please, again.
Okay, well, my name is Renate Brison. I am an educator by trade. That's what I do. Been doing that for 25 years. Currently, I wear the hat of Secretary for Pro-Swaliga Foundation. We are a foundation whose mission is basically to fully decolonize all 6 islands of the former Netherlands Antilles. We have been active, or let's say we were formed in July of 2020, right when the Dutch state announced that they were coming at that time with something called the Caribbean Reform Entity, which later became COHO. We later on went on to take legal action against the Dutch state. Both cases right now are in appeal, and that's basically it. My uncle happens to be the president of the foundation. He goes by the name of Denisio Brison, a well-known constitutional lawyer with a legal background on the island. He's advised various political parties over the last decade and a half of 12 years, and that's who I am, in a nutshell, very briefly.
Now, the thing is that you mentioned decolonize.
Yes.
That's a big issue for a lot of people, and it's a bad word for some people too. What do you think about there are like 2 schools of thought in Ireland about that?
Okay, so when we say decolonize, I think for us, a lot of people want to say independence, okay? Because if you look at, for instance, our neighboring island of St. Kitts, they became independent in the early 80s, okay? So that's a decolonization. There's a lot of trepidation here when you mention decolonization on the island, because we've been in this relationship with Holland for 65 years, and a lot of us, frankly, can't see ourselves doing without. Decolonization comes in various forms. You can be independent. You can have what is known as a free association, which is something like what Puerto Rico has, or you can become an integrated state, which is something like what Greenland has with Denmark. For us, what decolonization means is basically no outside interference of any form, shape, or form. So no higher supervision, no CFTs. If you go to our courthouses, which is predominantly overrun by Dutch judges and prosecutors and those kind of things, We would like to see that change so that we can be judged by our peers. Just certain things like that. Now, obviously, you have other schools of thought where it's independence. I would like to see one day for St. Martin to go independent. I believe we can, but obviously we need to become fiscally mature and fiscally responsible. In order to do so, I believe that we are a huge enough economic engine in the Eastern Caribbean based on our strategic position to be able to do it. But that would have to come with a monumental amount of government maturity within short.
Yeah, I know you Mr. Brison, you said 65 years.
Yes.
But it goes really before that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. 65 years of the Kingdom Charter, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, this goes 400 years plus, yes.
Because
yes.
I'm sitting there saying, Lord, I hope that people don't miss.
No. 65 years under the Kingdom Charter of 1954. I think it might be a little bit more than 65 years, but let's call it 65 plus, yes. Yeah. But we're talking with the Kingdom Charter formulation. Yes, sir. Definitely longer than that.
And
yes.
there's some discussions now about that need to be amended.
Yes. So this is nothing new, by the way. So basically, when the Kingdom Charter was presented to the United Nations in 1955, it was drawn up in 54 and then brought before the United Nations in 55. And if you read the UN deliberations, they had basically issues with 3 articles in the Kingdom Charter. Article 44, where we cannot amend our constitution without Dutch approval. And then Articles 50 and 51, which are known as the higher supervision clauses, where higher supervision can be invoked on any of the islands. You will remember in 2017, when William Marlin, after the hurricane, where the Dutch state issued what was known as a koninklijke besluit, which is a KB, to have him removed. Those things are legal instruments that are in Articles 50 and 51 of the Kingdom Charter. If you want to amend it, that would be the best way to amend the Kingdom Charter in order for us to have a full measure of self-governance and a right to self-determination.
Now, there's some legal scholars that are saying that St. Martin should have taken higher supervision instead of the cohort, because higher supervision is technically 4 years, and then they have to just go back to it. But if you take the cohort, you have 6-7 years. I understand it's now 6 years, and there's always a possibility that can be extended.
Right. Well, number one, we don't agree with higher supervision or cohort of any sort. I'm going to tell you why. When you ascribe to a higher supervision or you ascribe to an outside entity coming into your country, that means your democratic process, your electoral process has been sidelined. One of the principal things that you have as a people, besides your culture and your languages and all of these things, is your right to vote and to elect who you want to represent you in government. Now, whether you agree with how government is running, whether you disagree with how parliament is running, the fact of the matter is we have, quote unquote, fair elections here on the island. And we have to respect the mandate of the people. So if you're going to have a mandate of the people and then have it sidelined by higher supervision and something called cohort, then what sense does it make to have an electoral process in the first place? We might as well just become a gemeente of Holland. You would remember that in 2017, Statia's government was removed unceremoniously. Some call it a coup d'etat. In 2020, they went back to the polls, elected the very same party with an overwhelming majority, and still today they're still fighting to get their democracy back. And we don't want to put ourselves in that kind of situation.
But the thing is, Mr. Brison, is that our current government agreed to it.
Yes. Okay. So that's another argument. We agreed to cohort. Now, the draft kingdom law is called a consensus law. Now, you and I know what consensus means. For instance, if you and I come to an agreement that you're going to sell me something, we come to an agreement and we sell it. Now, if I come to you and I tell you with a bat behind my back that I want your home and I'm going to give you 5 guilders for it, and I threaten you with it, that is not really a consensus. And that is the crux of the matter. So the very basis on which the agreements were made were not made, they were made in contravention to international law. Basically, you're talking about economic exploitation at the time. The Prime Minister on April 11th, which was just maybe a month ago, went before Parliament and said basically that the Dutch tactics used to gain consensus included misdirection, misapplication of laws, and bullying. These are her words, summarized. Sorry. And so, we have to be careful to say we agreed, because we got to remember we were in the middle of a pandemic. We were told that unless we agreed to certain conditions, there would be no liquidity support. We had no airplanes coming in. We had no cruise ships coming in, which is the lifeline of our economy. And we had to agree at that time so that bills could be paid, civil servants could be paid, etc., etc., etc. So a lot of times when we say that the islands at St. Martin agreed, we have to kind of look at how did they agree? How did they come to this agreement? And it was definitely not a consensus.
The thing is that it still has to be ratified by Parliament.
Correct.
Mr. Martin. But at the same time, this it's a form of higher supervision.
Yes.
And I don't think people want to admit that.
Right. Well, it's not only a form of higher supervision. It goes a little bit beyond it. The last time I was here, you would remember that there was a leaked document that the Council of State, the Raad van State, had actually given a negative advice to Coho, which would have been at the time Coho 1.1. Basically rubbish it and go back and redraft it again, because the first version of it was not very good. If you look at Coho, and since then many experts have discussed Coho, and you won't find one expert that would fully agree that Coho is something good for the islands. And the main gist of the arguments for most of these legal experts and financial economic experts is this: Coho has no measurable financial analysis. It is basically a wish, something that we're going to put in place and hope for it to. There's no measurable data that it will work. Because remember, you're talking about things that you're projecting for the future. And then on top of that, the way it was put together was very ad hoc, hastily put together, and it's a very clumsy law. So if you look at all of these things put together, you would say that it is something that needs basically to be. Now, we're not saying we don't need reform. Okay, we all would agree that all islands, Curacao, Aruba, St. Martin, are definitely in need of reform. But it's the manner in which you want to displace the parliament and the manner in which you want to displace the government with an outside entity. It leaves a sour taste in the mouths of anybody, because it's a democratic process that's being contravened in the contravention to our democratic rights.
I think the reason why a lot of people will say that it's not going to work is that we just have to go back and look at the early 1990s.
Correct.
It was a period of time where the Dutch government was locking up political leaders. They brought in experts from Holland to reorganize the tax department. And let's fast forward to 2022. Everything's still the same.
There was an article, there was a gentleman in Curacao who spoke in front of their parliament. His name is Dr. Rutzel Marta. Very, very impressive man with he's a legal minded.
Yeah, he's a professor too at the University of Antilles.
Exactly.
Right.
And he stated that in 2008, Curaçao's debt was completely forgiven, and a CFT was introduced.
Right.
And today, Curaçao stands hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. So the very entity that you put in to supervise these budgets and to supervise spending, you have failed miserably. So, again, higher supervision hasn't worked, as you can attest to. The CFT hasn't worked. We look at this airport situation right now. In September, it will have been 5 years to refurbish an airport, not even to build it from scratch. Right. 5 years just to get it up and running again. So there's a definite track record. And then you would have heard on the BES Islands in Bonaire, there was protests last week and the week before. You would have read the article by Esmeralda Johnson, who was speaking about a lack of notarial services in Saba and mediocre banking services in Saba. And then obviously we know in Statia, their situation with the lack of democracy. So if you look at the overall picture over the last decade, we don't see any record where you can point to and say, yes, the Netherlands intervention has worked to improve the islands or make us more resilient.
The thing is, during the negotiations for the separation of St. Martin from the Netherlands Antilles, right, that was a condition.
Right.
Financial supervision.
Yes.
So St. Martin agreed to it.
Yes.
And one of the conditions was that if you had 3 consecutive balanced budgets, then there would be no more need for it.
Yes.
That never happened.
Right.
We were close to it.
We were close to
but
it.
never
and
happened because of Hurricane Irma.
Yeah, Irma. So we were close to it, and then obviously Irma kind of threw that off. But again, I don't know. I'm of the personal opinion that none of these, not none of them, but particularly the CFT, based on the ballooning, deficits of the three islands, the Curacao, Aruba, and St. Martin, that there's really no added value, because obviously if you're there to supervise these budgets and spending and everything, why under your watch has there been? And here's another indictment. Coho would actually, if Coho was to be put in place, they would actually, the CFT would have to answer to this entity. So that is actually a damning, light on the CFT, that this new entity, that CFT, would have to answer to them.
Yeah.
So,
And how does Pro-Swaliga feel about the current budget of St. Martin now? The budget, not the budget, I'm sorry, the debt. The debt is over 1.4 billion guilders.
Again, that's why it goes back to, we do need reform. Okay, so we're not saying that just because we're not against, we're against Coho and we're against outside intervention does not mean that we don't believe that we have to tighten our belts. We definitely have to tighten our belts, but at the same time, and I believe I heard she's an MP now, she's former Minister Ludmila de Weeva on this exact show, said that under no circumstances would she be in favor of burdening her people with more taxes.
Right.
And I certainly agree. So I think we need to get creative as far as using our monies to get return on investment. So our government-owned companies seem to be pretty liquid. What are they doing with this money to invest in the international markets to get some return on investment? Even if it's 10%, 8%, whatever it is better than it just sitting in a bank where you're getting basically nothing. So we have to kind of start thinking about, instead of burdening our people, we need to start thinking about what monies we have, where we can invest them abroad in order to get return on investment, so that way we can close the gap on this budget that we have. I think that's something that we're not doing. Yeah.
Well, what about debt forgiveness?
How
do you feel about that?
MP George Pantaflet,
Right.
he's
been
a huge,
advocate
a huge proponent of debt forgiveness, and we talk quite frequently. He's a very approachable MP, not to say the others are not, but he's very approachable, down to earth gentleman. And I tell him all the time that, it would be very difficult, because debt forgiveness means that basically you're admitting to a lot of historical wrongs, in my opinion. And I don't know where I think they've done it before. I think it's been done before. I can't tell you what years or whatever. But I think right now, as far as this, because I think for Coho has come up to 1 billion euros for all three islands total. And I think that, for them to forgive this debt would actually mean that their initial idea to make these islands resilient was a failure. So I don't know where we're going to go and what the actual, what are the chances of the Dutch state, dealing with us with debt forgiveness. I think debt forgiveness should be something that we don't rely on, but something that it could happen. But I think we need to be proactive with our own finances in order to generate income. And there are a lot of ways to do it. Yeah.
That's where the problem comes in, because there's no fiscal responsibility.
Correct.
And that leaves a lot of things.
Correct. To quote Marcel Gomes, I heard him once speaking, and he said, living a champagne lifestyle on a Marby budget. And it's something I use all the time. We're a tiny little island. We have a lot of, people coming here and money coming in. But if you look at the size of our government, number one. Oh, and don't forget, next year we're supposed to expand to 17 seats. That's what I've heard, based on the population.
Right.
And the Constitution says that we must expand by 2 seats. Now, that is something that we should not even be entertaining. We can't even afford the 15 that we have now, and the entourage and the building, et cetera, extra cars, extra drivers, extra policy advisors. We're going to take on 2 more in September of 2023, I think. I believe that.
Members of Parliament.
Yeah, 17 members of Parliament. Now, to put that in perspective, Barbados has a population of 300,000. And they have 30 MPs. 300,000, and they have 30 MPs. We have forget about population. We have a voting registry of somewhere between 20 and 25,000. And we're going to end up with 17 MPs. For what? So these are the kind of things that if you're serious about financial responsibility and fiscal responsibility, you need to tighten your own belt, especially in this time when inflation is through the roof, fuel is through the roof, food costs are through the roof. Your government has to take the proactive lead and tighten your own belt. There's no way we should be expanding by 2 seats to 17 seats. It's, in my opinion, it's fiscally irresponsible.
Well, we have an overloaded government.
Oh, yeah.
All over.
Oh, yes. Yeah. What has happened is the Caribbean has adopted an EU model of government that we cannot afford. So basically, when we went independent or when we went to have our own administrations, we copied the House of Assemblies, the Senates, the Parliaments, the Council of Ministers of the European model, and we cannot afford these models. I mean, I've heard that in Barbados, 6 out of 10 Bajans or Barbadians work for the government. 60% of the population works for the government in some way, shape, or form, directly or indirectly, and you can't. That's not a recipe for success. So we definitely need to streamline. Now, obviously, you don't want to send people home. You want to be very cautious on how you're doing things. You don't want to just fire people and send people home because that doesn't do anything for your economy and spending power of your people. But definitely, like right now, we have the Ministry of Rummy and the Ministry of Finance on a hiring binge while civil servants have been asked to take a 12.5% cut and teachers have been asked to do without vacation pay. These things don't make sense. How are you hiring more people when you've just told people that they have to go with 12.5% cuts? Maybe it's because people in the government are fleeing to go to the private sector because of the harsh conditions. Maybe that's what it is. But, there has to be a balance somewhere.
If you go back before 1995, Hurricane Lewis,
correct.
When we had Muller Bay, a very large hotel, there was a time when the private sector really employed the majority of people on this island. Muller Bay was a huge employer.
Yes.
You fast forward past 1995, and today, now the government of St. Martin is the largest employer on the island.
Right.
And if you look throughout the region, everywhere where you have the government on these small islands as the largest employer, they have huge problems.
Huge issues, yes. And you're right. Like I said, we just talked about Barbados. You don't want your government being your biggest employer. It it drains your coffers. It drains your revenue that you're taking in. Again, we do need civil servants. Again, we're not saying send civil servants home, et cetera, but we need to kind of find a way to reinvigorate the private sector. Like Mullet Bay that you're saying, for 25 years, it's just been sitting there. What is it that we can do legally to get that back into the hands of government in order to, Mullet Bay is easily 500, 600, 700 jobs.
Right.
Which, if you look and you calculate the tax revenues that you would create from that, I think it would be more than that, would be a huge boost to the government's coffers. So, we agree with the fact that you have more people working for government, but at the same time, it is a kind of a tricky situation because you just don't want to send people home. What you might want to do is have a hiring freeze rather than, employing more people all the time.
Right. Well, in case you've just joined us, you're watching Oral Gibbs Live. My guest on the program is Mr. Brison. He's secretary of Pro Swaliga Foundation. When we come back, we'll continue speaking with him right here on Oral Gibbs Live.
In order to know what you want out of life, you need to observe, listen, and try it yourself. Promises, we can make it. If we work together, that's just how it is. Let's stand strong, and serve the land. Working hard as one nation, yes we can. The
is to achieve, the more satisfying it is to make it.
Just believe in us, we'll see you through it all. Oh, never give up. Oh, never give up. We can make it.
Never forget those who were there for you. And if you dream big, you might just achieve it.
The power to serve, standing for community. OGB got the power to serve, the power to serve. We got the energy. OGB.
Make use of WIB mobile banking with easy access and direct usage of face recognition, PIN code, or fingerprint. Download WIB mobile banking app and make your transaction from anywhere at any time. For more information,
My guest on Oral Gibbs Live, you see him there, is Mr. Brison. Renate Brison is the secretary of Pro Swaliga Movement, and we're here to speak with Mr. Brison. I understand that you all received a letter from the Dutch government today?
Yes, just today we received a letter from the Dutch Second Chamber, the Tweede Kamer,
Yeah.
basically stating that we've provided them with some information that may be useful for them with their deliberations with COHO. This information is basically based on what is known as the right to self-determination. So you hear people running around all the time that we have a right to self-determination, we have a right to full governance, but what exactly does that mean? So in international law, you have something called a peremptory norm, or a jus cogens, or in Dutch is called a dwingend recht. A peremptory norm, an example of a peremptory norm would be something like the abolition of slavery. So if, like, say, for instance, let's just use a country, Sri Lanka wanted to introduce slavery into its country, it could not, because slavery, the abolition of slavery is known as a peremptory norm, meaning worldwide accepted as something that cannot be reintroduced because it basically flouts the norms of the international community. The right to self-determination is one of those norms. Now, a peremptory norm, there can be no deviation or no derogation from the right of self-determination. Meaning, if you try to violate my right to self-determination by any means or any form, whether it's by, if you want to say because of natural disaster, economic disaster, what have you, COVID pandemic, for instance, we cannot deviate from that. So you can't say, oh, we introduced COHO because of the pandemic. We say that to say this. So the Dutch state themselves have had a written statement that they submitted to the International Court of Justice in 2018, where they acknowledge that the right to self-determination is a peremptory norm. And what we have done is brought this up to the Dutch state using the European Convention of Human Rights, who also quote these peremptory norms, and inform them that COHO and anything having to deal with COHO, the consensus again that we talked about, that wasn't really a consensus, violates our right to self-determination, which is a peremptory norm from which there can be no deviation under no circumstances, whether we're autonomous country within the kingdom, whether we're a colony, whether we're a territory. The right to self-determination cannot be violated by any means. The Dutch state is also on record of saying that the right to self-determination shall not be impeded by outside pressure or interference. So we kind of brought these things up to the state secretary, sent her a letter on April the 6th, and today we got a response from the second chamber stating that they were in receipt of our letter. And I'm just going to say one more thing, and that there was information in the letter that would be useful when they have the deliberations with COHO. What you have to understand too about the second chamber and the first chamber of the Netherlands, a lot of them are ex-professors, a lot of them are, studied law.
Yeah, a lot of lawyers.
Yes, a lot of lawyers. So when you start talking about things like peremptory norms, jus cogens, and dwingend in letters, they have to stand up straight because they understand that they're legal-minded, that these things are serious implications on the international level. And that is why they found some of the information that we sent them in our letter very useful.
So basically, they're just confirming that they're in receipt of the letter from
Yes, and that there was information in the letter that we sent them that would be useful when they have their coho deliberations. Yeah.
I want to jump back, and you go back and forth, and
Yeah, no
feel
problem.
free to what you said earlier, because this is central, our legal system.
Yes.
Where you have the judges, lawyers, etc. And you said earlier that at the beginning of the program, this was very important to pro-Swaliga,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
and that you would like to see it representative of the people.
Yes.
But that's such a difficult thing to accomplish.
Not necessarily. So, you see, what Pro Swaliga believes in is using using our blueprints that we have within the region.
Yeah.
So you'll always hear me, particularly not my uncle too much, always referring to Sinkits. Why? Similar size, similar population. Well, maybe not size, physical size, but similar population. Recently independent in the scheme of things, early 80s. The smallest nation in the Western Hemisphere that's an independent country. A lot of people don't know that. So in the Eastern Caribbean, you have something called the Eastern Caribbean Court, right? The Eastern Caribbean, the Eastern Caribbean Court. So Anguilla is part of it. The BVI is part of it. Montserrat is part of it. St. Kitts is part of it. I want to go down here a little bit. I want to say like St. Lucia and some of them are in this Eastern Caribbean Court. And what they do is they rotate their judges amongst themselves. So you could, because remember the legal system amongst the CARICOM is pretty much similar from the old British system.
Right.
Now, why we say that's important is because, look, whether we want to admit it or not, we don't speak Dutch in St. Martin. I'm not saying we're not well versed in it. We have some people that are well versed, but if you compare us to Curacao and Aruba, we're not well versed. Then a lot of our students that are here in school, most of them either take a Canadian curriculum, American curriculum, or the CXC curriculum, which most of our brothers and sisters in the CARICOM Islands take. Then you have the UE system. UE has a magnificent law school. Most of our judges and lawyers and barristers in the Eastern Caribbean court system, went to the UE system either in Barbados, Trinidad, or in Jamaica. So, and they rotate amongst themselves. As a matter of fact, the head justice or head magistrate of the Eastern Caribbean court comes from the BVI, which is not even what you would say an independent country, but they still use the same legal system.
Because they're not even just associate member of
Yeah,
CARICOM.
right. They're an associate member, correct, and they're actually a non-self-governing territory.
Right.
But yet they found this lady from there who studied the same legal system in Jamaica to make her the head magistrate. So they all have the same common law system. And so you can go to Anguilla and find a Kittitian practicing law there. You can go to, Montserrat and find Anguillian practicing law there. That would open doors now for our students to send them to UE, adopt their legal system, and then put it in place here. Now, obviously, we'll have to tweak some things because obviously there's some things that we have from the Dutch law code that would have to be, switched over. But that it wouldn't be that difficult. And as a matter of fact, there is a judge from Holland. I think his name is Bob Witt, I believe. He sits on one of the international courts, regional Caribbean court in Trinidad.
Yeah. He's been on this program a few times.
Thank you.
A few years ago.
Yeah, he's down there. So you see, it's a lot of things that we don't know. One of our own Dutch judges is highly esteemed and sits. I forgot what the court is in Trinidad.
But he's also a member of the Constitutional Court of St. Martin, you know that?
Yes, he is. He's one of, I think it's the 3 judges they have.
Yeah.
So that's why we're saying that, so even a guy like Bob Witt, who's around, he knows all of these things, but obviously he wouldn't tell us. So I don't think the transfer would be too big, but I would like to see that some of our students are able to go away and study law in a language that they would be able to understand rather than being a barrier.
But people say, look, Mr. Brison, your uncle, Mr. Brison, is a lawyer. We have a lot of people on the island that are lawyers. Why change it? Why just not make sure?
We have a lot that are lawyers, right? The lawyer is not a problem. We have plenty. We have Brenda Brooks. We have Richard Gibson Jr. You have Dennis Brison. You have Melinda Hoover. You have a whole bunch.
Yeah.
How many judges do we have? How many prosecutors do we have? Now, how has the prosecution dealt with our people, whether they're guilty or not? Yes, remember it's innocent until proven guilty. How has this prosecutor's office dealt with our people over the last 10, 15 years?
Well,
now,
some people say they're executing the law.
they are executing the law, but sometimes it's a little bit, 3, 4 in the morning, kicking in a door, babies.
So you say it's heavy-handed.
Yeah, it's a little bit heavy-handed. So we just believe that you're supposed to be judged by your peers. Like, for instance, the example I like to use was Holland was once a colony of Spain. I don't expect to go to Utrecht and walk in a courthouse and hear anybody speaking Spanish because of an old colonial lineage back to 300-400 years ago when they were a colony of Spain. So what we would like to see, and it's like I said, go to Anguilla, walk in their courthouses. What are you going to see? You're going to see Caribbean people conducting legal practice in their countries.
By the way, you don't know, Junior Lake's daughter is a lawyer in Anguilla.
There you go.
He's from St. Martin.
You see, there you go. And you go to St. Kitts. I met a Kittitian one time, and she told me she's never seen a quote-unquote European judge or prosecutor in her life. Because when she goes to the courthouse, they may not all be Kittitian, but they're all from this region. So we have something in common. And I think that's what we need. And I think because we've been in this system for so long, we don't know better than to have Dutch judges sitting on our constitutional court and Dutch judges in our courthouse. I think it's just something that you want to have a court system. Not to say to give your people any kind of preferential treatment, but just to be proud to say that, look, this young man graduated from St. Martin Academy. He went to UWI Mona campus. He came back with his law degree, and now he's a judge in St. Martin. That is something.
Some people say that one of the reasons is that local lawyers feel that they can make more money practicing law than sitting on the bench.
Correct. Private practice. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I have friends that are lawyers. Private practice makes more money than probably being a judge or what have you. But again, we would find something. In every society, you're going to find somebody, and it's all about exposing the young people to a career that they may not have known about. Hey, how would you like to be a prosecutor? Hey, how would you like to become a judge? Oh, I never thought about that. And push them in that direction. We don't need 100 judges, but if we had a good pool of 10 or 12, that'll be good. And remember, they can rotate amongst the islands. A judge from here could work in Anguilla, could work in the BVI, could work in St. Kitts. Yeah.
I have some concerns because this is a small island, and I noticed in the past I've been victim of the government because they want to shut me down, and they use every trick in the book to destroy me. And these are not Europeans.
Right.
These are St. Martin people that look like you and I that try to literally destroy me.
Agreed.
And so I am reluctant sometimes when I look at my life and what was done to me by government to trust them in the legal system because I'm just afraid that they're going to abuse
the legal system. Remember you have the trias politicas. So technically, government is supposed to be a separate entity from the judicial system. They're not supposed to be. A small island, obviously you can't avoid it. But technically, there's not supposed to be government having any overbearing reach on the judicial system. Now, on a small island, those things become a little difficult because we all know each other. We grew up with each other. But I do understand what you're saying. But I'm looking more at the greater good, where I would, I'm in education. So I'm always for the young people having opportunities to lead their country. And I would like to see our legal system run by our own young students that we put out. I would like to see our hospital that's coming on board, our general hospital, run on board, being led by a son or daughter of the soil.
But we have a doctor there, Dr. Holiday, that's run.
Yes, but no disrespect to Dr. Holiday, but I would like to see someone, young to take the mantle, if you would like to say that. Nothing wrong with Dr. Holiday at all. Yeah.
No, look, I understand. The thing is that we've made it so difficult for our own people. Again, I don't know if you recall if he was in St. Martin at the time when Dr. Brison
Yes.
came back to St. Martin,
Yes.
the gynecologist.
Right. Oh, Friday.
Right.
Dr. Friday. Yes, I
Dr.
know that
Friday.
story quite well.
Okay,
Yes.
and they gave that gentleman so many problems.
Yes, I
Our
agree. Yes.
own professionals here on St. Martin. Today, Dr. Friday is well-respected
Respected,
gynecologist
yes,
on
yes,
St. Martin.
yes.
But at the time,
Yeah.
if he didn't stood his ground,
Yeah.
he would have left St.
Yeah.
Martin.
I remember he had to actually go and practice in Anguilla for a while because he wasn't. Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm going to say something that may not be too popular, but I always say this: St. Martin is one of the few places that I've visited in the world, probably the only place in the world that has an intrinsic fear of promoting its own people at times. So you'll see a young person, go away, get your degree, come back. This person comes back with their master's degrees, their PhD degree or what have you, law degree, what have you, and then all of a sudden everybody's threatened by the very thing you told them to do. And that has to stop because you don't see that anywhere in the world.
But at the same time, that's why we need fresh blood,
Correct.
new young people. And
Correct.
I notice some of the younger politicians are not like that now.
Right.
It's just slowly changing.
Right. So you have now, we've had a chance to interact with Parliament, obviously, because in November 2020 they passed a motion supporting our legal actions, and we must say that we're not saying totally because it takes time, but these younger politicians are kind of trying to do things a little bit differently, a little bit more brash, a little bit more, a little bolder. Parliament seems to be a little bit more, I found in the past Parliament just to be a meeting place with nothing much coming out of substance. Now we have a long way to go, don't get me wrong, because Parliament is still a lawmaking body, and we don't see a lot of laws coming out of Parliament. We see a lot of motions coming out of Parliament, but we're heading in the right direction, I believe, with these youngsters that we have there.
But here we have a problem again with Parliament that for years we've been speaking about.
Yeah.
You have 15 members of Parliament,
Yes.
right? How many lawyers
One.
are assigned to Parliament?
One out of the 15 is legal-minded. Wait,
And how many-
let me say
yeah.
legal-minded. 1 out of the 15 went to school to study law, and that would be, I believe, MP Rayon Peterson.
Right.
I believe there's another one right now that is studying. No, but with that being said, though, you don't necessarily have to go to law school to be a good parliamentarian and to be a good legal-minded parliamentarian. What it does take, though, is for you to have interest in making your place better. You have interest in making your country better as a parliamentarian and understanding that your role as a parliamentarian is you are lawmakers. So if you're running for office and you know you're going to be in Parliament, it doesn't behoove you to sit there and not being able to be legal-minded or to become legal-minded.
Well, I think I meant in terms of having a staff of lawyers.
Right.
That's what I meant. So right now, the different factions in Parliament
Yes.
don't have.
That I'm not aware of.
Yeah,
I know
very
that
little.
my uncle was advising a couple of parties for a while. I was under the assumption that every faction in there had some kind of legal mind to advise them. If that is not the case, then we're in a lot of trouble because most of our parliamentarians are not legally minded.
Because you have 15 members of Parliament. You have 2 that is a form of coalition that supports the government.
Correct.
And then you have the minority
We have
party.
multiple factions.
Exactly.
Yes.
If you take for America, I like to use America as an
Oh
example.
yeah, I grew up there. so
You
yes.
have in Congress,
Oh,
you
yeah.
have about 85% are lawyers.
Yeah.
And still, each of them have 2 or 3 lawyers
Yes,
around them.
correct.
Here, our parliamentarians are just moving blindly.
They're just moving money. In most countries you go to, and I won't say developed, I'll just say matured, because you don't necessarily have to be developed in order to have a mature parliament. You will find in parliament, you'll find 2 types of people, 3 types. You'll find former educators, you'll find lawyers, and you'll also find business people in your government and in your parliament. But you're quite correct. I often wonder with the things that I see, government-wise and parliament-wise, who are your legal advisors? because sometimes it becomes a thing where some decisions are made or some actions are taken, or there's some things that can be done while seeking legal advice. Now, one good thing I have to say about Parliament, they did go and seek legal advice from the Council of Advice regarding Coho before, giving a decision which was due on May 20th, as a matter of fact, yes.
So how does pro-Swaliga movement feel about the current situation since the inception? What you wish that you should have done, or what you want to see done in the near future?
As far as cohorts, just generally?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we would like to see done is we would like for the government and Parliament, not Parliament so much, because Parliament is a lawmaking body, the government of St. Martin, to start, and this is not just to kind of blow our own horn or what have you, to start reading and taking what we say seriously. And I'm not saying this because he's a family member, but Denisio Brison is one of the brightest minds we have on this island, and I might dare say in the 6 islands that are here. He reads extensively, he knows a lot, and his heart is in the right place for this country. He's passionate about this. Yeah. When he comes out and he puts a pen to paper, you better believe it's well researched, it's well thought out, it's methodical, it's meticulous, and we would like government is between a rock and a hard place. Yes, you have the Dutch bearing down on you. You have fiscal issues. We have a way out. There are legal ways out. And today, like I told you, we got a letter from the Twitter camera saying, listen, this stuff you wrote in the letter, a lot of it looks good, and we're going to take it on board. We're here for 2 years. We don't need that acknowledgement because we're very proud of the work that we do. That's one. Number two, we would like to see the government stop being so, for lack of a better word, Hague focused, so Amsterdam focused. The world has 150 something different countries. When are we going to head out to Dubai? When are we going to head out to China? When are we going to head out to Cuba?
Are we restricted?
Restricted from what? Jumping on a plane and making bilateral agreements for what?
Well, you know what happened a few years ago? People went to prison.
When's that? When they went to...
When they signed that deal with a member of the European Union, which is Italy at the time.
Oh, with the airport you're talking about. Yes.
The Dutch government got really mad.
That was because the money disappeared, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I'm not defending those people.
Right.
I'm just telling you.
When they went to seek financing elsewhere for the airport. Right. I remember that correct. That would have been in the 90s.
In the 90s.
Yes. Well, yes, but we're talking like, for instance, Par Latino. You're going to Par Latino once a year. The membership fee costs you $30,000 a year. This year you went with half of Parliament to Par Latino.
But what we have to show for it?
Nada. It's no added value unless you're going there to strike. No, those countries in Central America, they have mass agriculture. Bananas, pineapples, this, that, the next thing. They can feed themselves. What are we doing agriculturally to seal some deals with them to get them here, to have their products coming here at a cheaper price? Nothing. Par Latino has added no value to us except a report that goes in the waste bin.
But I'm smiling that you say that because we are part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands.
Correct.
The Netherlands is one of the most advanced countries agriculturally.
Correct.
So why aren't we using their expertise?
And here's the thing. I've always argued, I told somebody the other day, I said, look, if the Dutch state really had our interests at heart, and this is going to sound very low level, very superficial, but I'm just going to say, you have Philips, you have Amstel, you have Heineken. We don't have a single one of those factories on any one of these 3 islands here.
Some of them are in the Caribbean. So then St. Lucia, I think, have a plant.
Good. So we don't have a single Heineken plant, Amstel plant in it. So those kind of, I think Curacao might have one.
Curaçao, Amstel?
I don't. Well, wait. Okay, so we don't have anything major. There are no major Dutch factories on these islands for us to say, you know what? We want you to be employed. We want you to go ahead and take our products and be the major distributors for Central America, South America, and North America. These are the kind of things we need. We need job creation rather than burdening our people and burdening our middle class. When you burden your middle class, the spending power diminishes, and that has a knock-on effect on your economy.
That's happening right now.
And that's a thing. That's why this 12.5% needs to be reversed forthwith. Curaçao made an announcement recently, the Minister of Finance over there, Silviana, I believe his name is, that he's going to be looking into returning to ending the 12.5% and paying out vacation pay. Aruba is also having rumblings with that. We've heard nothing from the government here. As a matter of fact, we released a press release today regarding the 12.5%, and that's against our right to self-determination, because that was something that came about from Coho, where there was not really a legal consensus per se when you were bullied into giving away our money.
Well, I hope that you all will come to the aid of the Prime Minister here, because she needs help.
Well,
she made a mistake, but I think it will be corrected.
Unfortunately, you know what we've learned from the Dutch state and our government? They only pay attention when they're threatened with legal action. And it's sad. So we will send letters. We want to hear from you in 3 weeks, we don't. We want to hear from you in 2 weeks, we don't. And then we're left to have to discuss it in front of a judge, rather than discussing it amicably. And I think what happens is with a lot of politicians, they believe, and this is just me speaking here, not pro Swadiga, I think a lot of people believe because you're in office, you know all.
Yeah.
And the one that thinks that knows all ends up not knowing anything at all. You're only as good as the people around you and the people you surround yourself with. So if you have an organization out here that has proven, number one, we don't even have a bank account. We're taking money from no one. Because what we believe is whoever pays you controls you. So we have no paymasters, we don't have bank accounts. We're doing all of this work. Basically, what you would call what's the word again?
Pro bono.
Pro bono. There it is. Slip of mine. And you're seeing the fruits of the work, but you're not taking any of this on. So today we asked her about the 12.5% that you're requesting. You don't have to request anything from the state secretary, because your right to self-determination has been violated. Now, if you're requesting 12.5%, if you're requesting the state secretary to give back 12.5%, that means you have the money. Just give it. Just give it away. If you're requesting it, that means you have it. Because if she said yes tomorrow, that means you're going to give it back to us, right? That means it has to be there. Just give it to the people. Why would you go to the state secretary and ask them to give you something that you signed on to under duress? So that's what we're saying.
These are very difficult times for St.
are.
Martin. We're at a crossroads right now.
Yes.
And this Coho is a replacement of the government of St. Martin and the parliament of St. Martin. And I don't think the population realize what's happening here.
It part of that is the government hasn't been very transparent with Coho. You would see the Aruban Prime Minister come on TV and kind of try to explain what Coho is all about, or the Caribbean politicians to explain what Coho is all about. It hasn't been well explained to everyone, and I think that's why you see a lot of people here don't understand the implications and ramifications of what this entity is, and this is why we're so vehemently against it. Not only is it stripping away the powers of parliament and government, whether you like them or not, you have to respect our democratic process, okay? Because we're going to end up like Stacia. And then the next thing is, you're talking about the possibility of imposing property taxes. So I go to people and say, if you have a house worth $300,000, they come and tell you 2.2%, 3%, 2.5% of the value of your home, you have to pay that on an annual basis. Do the math. Then, if you can't pay it, what ends up happening to that home? Who ends up buying that home? So you end up seeing a flight of people, and then you have a whole gentrification of your people based on these property taxes. We have to be very, very careful with what the Dutch are proposing, because again, as you correctly stated, we don't have a sustained record of where their involvement has led to a prospering of the island. And we don't know what this Coho thing will do for 6 years. It could be for the worst, it could be for the better. But based on what we're seeing in Bonaire Station, Sabre, after 12 years of Dutch intervention, Absolutely not.
Well, you just have to look at the past.
Yeah.
And what was promised.
Yeah.
And what was delivered.
Exactly.
And if you look at the past, then you can determine.
It's a very good indication of what the
Ex-
present is going to be in the future. Correct,
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So, Mr. Bryson, always a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you for having me, sir.
We have about 40 seconds. Anything else you want to add in close?
No, that's it. Pro Soliga is here. We would like to say that our work is basically done. We've finally gotten the final arguments that we need. We have the detention of the Dutch state. We're also trying to work with government in order to have them realize and to realize that their right to self-determination is paramount. It cannot be deviated from in any way, means, shape, or form. We are here to assist. We're here to help. And what we're trying to get done is to ensure that this coho initiative by the Dutch state does not see daylight on our island. We're easily accessible. We're always on the media. We're always on Facebook. We're always doing our press releases. And we're hoping that once and for all we can get this coho situation finalized, and then we can go back to taking our own initiatives to turn things around rather than having people do it for us.
All right. So, Mr. Brison, Secretary for Pro Soliga Movement, thank you again.
Thank you
Much
for
success.
having me again,
All right.
sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. And that's it for now. See you next time.